It's not just the information. This is coming up, but then there's some why. The why is we are struggling, we are competing, we want to win this, or we are developing a new initiative, we want to promote something new, or we maybe my why as the leader is I want to inspire, I want to encourage, I want to scare. I don't know, like think about your why, and the what you say then can have more impact because it's got what I like to call the story below the story. Like there's something else going on. You're telling the story as the way for us to align about the what happened, but the why is the message. The why is the meaning. The why is the inner life of that. So that's why, I could tell a story about planting flowers. And to me, the emotional response or experience that I had in telling it was actually connecting to something a little bit more deeper and psychologically colorful, which is about my life and who I am.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Corey Rosen. Corey is the author of A Story for Everything, Mastering Diverse Storytelling for Any Occasion, a comprehensive guide to storytelling for professional, educational, and personal success. He hosts the Moth Story Slams and Grand Slams and has been featured on the Moth Radio Hour. Rosen is an on-air personality for Alice Radio's The Sarah and Vinny Show, the #1 rated morning show in the San Francisco area, and teaches with Bats Improv. When not writing or performing, Corey works as a visual effects artist and executive producer. He is credited in movies including Mission Impossible, several Star Wars films, and Disney's A Christmas Carol. He has taught at NYU and Academy of Art University, written for Comedy Central, Jim Henson Productions, and Lucasfilm. Congrats on The Story for Everything, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Carl. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I'm a fellow story junkie. I think I'm well aware of how everyone has so many stories that they don't realize the value of. But how do you work with people or help them just realize how full of stories they are and how to actually use those stories and tell them in a way that helps them achieve their goals?
Great question. And I loved your intro. I think that you're absolutely right about the H to H-ness of, connection, whether it's in business or in life, whether we're talking to our students as a teacher, whether we're talking to our patients as a doctor, whether we're talking to our partner on a date, wherever we are, we're humans connecting in different ways, and finding ways of connecting is the central precept of all of that. And how we connect is through our stories. So to your question is how to identify those stories, what stories to tell is to some people a challenge. It's a way of thinking like, well, I don't have any real stories. There's these things that happen in my life, or there's these experiences that I've gone through, or maybe they think that they have a couple of big stories, the big time I got the dream job, or the time I got fired from that job, or the time that I got in that big, medical emergency, or whatever that is. That they think of those kind of critical or often negative times in their lives as the big stories, and everything else is just things that happened. But from my point of view, everything can be a story. I think if we look at the things that we've gone through, how we've experienced them, and then what we're processing through those experiences through the lens of, if I could, story, then we shape them in ways that are a little bit more impactful and more memorable to ourselves and others. So this weekend, for example, I was telling you, we were chit-chatting before we started recording that I planted a garden in front of my house. I've got this sort of sad looking tree. I bought some flowers and I planted it. Well, that's not a story. That's just something that I did. But what I could do is I could spin that using the tools of a storyteller. I could frame what that tree has meant to me and how I look at it and how sad it's gotten since really, if I look back in my own life, the pandemic was the last time I really took care of that tree because I had nowhere else to be. It was just me and my house, and I would look at that tree. And so I sort of brought some joy to myself and my family by planting a little garden around that tree. But now time has has moved on and I've moved on, and that tree has reverted back to being uncared for and unkempt and kind of sad again. And it's the end of it's coming to be the end of another school year, and not just a school year, kind of an impactful one for me. So as a human, I am a parent and I have a child who is graduating from high school, which means that at the end of this year, we're going through these decisions, like literally in real time, about what's going to happen, where she will go, what will become of her, and also what will become of me. Like I will be transitioning too, as you do when you are a parent and someone is moving on in their lives. Of course, I'm joyful and happy about it. But my own way of processing that, I think, was to also go inward. And so planting this little garden, planting and replanting this beautiful marigolds and orange and red flowers that are right in front of the gate where I walk in and out of my apartment building, has given me now hope, joy, optimism, beauty, and who knows? It's a very fresh and new thing, but in some ways, I think new life is the symbol that I'm holding on to for what could be. Anyway, I'm sort of improvising that story. But the point is, I've made a story out of a thing that happened. And by giving it some shape, story-like shape, it also reflects a little bit of who I am, like what I think like and how I communicate, and maybe a little bit about who I am. And it might remind you of an experience that you've had in the very human way that stories also kind of open up pathways between people and say, oh, it's funny you mentioned that because my mom had a garden, or I once tried to grow a garden and failed horribly. The idea is that it should be to some degree a closed experience. It's a story, but it's also an opening experience, which is to say that we are now connected.
Yeah, 100% of the connective element, the shared experience, or like sharing of similar experiences, is one of the real powers of storytelling, because you can, people see what your life is like and how you responded to it and the way you approach the same sort of challenges they approach, or the experiences they've experienced. And that realization that of what you have in common builds trust and connection and relationships. And also one of the things that I think the power of storytelling, that especially for people trying to lead teams or trying to get people to feel inspired to do something after hearing a story, is that stories help give those what seemingly kind of inconsequential or kind of mundane moments in life meaning, because it connects it to a larger purpose or an identity to the people involved. So planting a garden for some people that's what a kind of normal, mundane, not super exciting thing, but because you're able to explain how you were feeling because of what's going on with your family and the time of year and how long it's been since you cared for it and all these other things, that the context around what people see, the simple act of just planting some flowers, that's not a story worth telling. Right. But it's all the what's going on inside your head, how you're feeling about it, and the impact it has on your life that gives that seemingly at first glance inconsequential act a lot of purpose and like a reason for happening. Yeah. And that same idea taken to a leader trying to lead a team and getting them up and ready to do some work on something that might not seem super important, but having them, how the story can help align that with the larger purpose of the company or the team or their initiatives or whatever they're trying to do. And that gives people a reason to care about something that might not have seemed as important before.
Yep. Are you familiar with, I think it's called the Golden Circle? Is that what that's called? It's like a, sort of concentric circles that have what, how, why.
Yeah. Simon Sinek's thing.
Yeah. I think he calls, Simon Sinek. So the idea applies, I think, especially in business storytelling, but it could also be in personal storytelling, is I told you a story about the flowers. You're a business leader. You're telling your team some information about quarterly revenue, or about an upcoming meeting that's coming, or about some job opportunity that we're going after. Like, there's some why, there's some reason behind communicating that information at work or in your personal life. It's not just the information, this is coming up, but then there's some why. The why is we are struggling, we are competing, we want to win this, or we are developing a new initiative, we want to promote something new, or we maybe my why as the leader is I want to inspire, I want to encourage, I want to scare. I don't know, like think about your why, and the what you say then can have more impact because it's got what I like to call the story below the story. Like there's something else going on. You're telling the story as the way for us to align about the what happened, but the why is the message. The why is the meaning. The why is the inner life of that. So that's why, I could tell a story about planting flowers, and to me, the emotional response or experience that I had in telling it was actually connecting to something a little bit more deeper and psychologically colorful, which is about my life and who I am. And so I sometimes look at phases of different either projects, whether professionally or personally, who I was or what I was going through, so that the thing that I experienced is then more resonant. It really can reflect on us, what we got through. So it could be a team story about how we won this new business or how we accomplished this seemingly, difficult objective.
Yeah, and I like how what you said about it gives you insights into the person behind the story and who they are and what they care about, and it really shows the power of storytelling and building trust and how much our brains are wired for storytelling, because like when you're going through your experience and you're sharing that emotional journey you went on from something that just is like planting flowers, what makes people connect with it is because when our brains have something called mirror neurons, and so we feel, if you empathize with someone and connect with them and understand them or kind of see yourself in their shoes, then your brain goes through the same like physical responses as if you're actually going through the experience yourself. That's why people like horror films. If you watch the hero you care about being chased by like an axe wielding maniac, you start sweating, you start breathing heavily, you get all the same physical responses if you were being chased, but you're sitting in a theater eating popcorn.
Yeah.
And so you can get those sort of emotional experiences without having to be through in the actual dangerous moment. But in this case, it's when your team hears about what you went through, if they've, like I said, they had a similar experience, and they go, okay, they feel that connection because there's a deeper emotional experience they go through because of the story, versus just saying, oh, I planted some flowers over the weekend.
Yep.
Just the data itself doesn't get that same response.
Yeah.
It's the story around it that really gets people to lean in and feel like they're connected. And as much as people might think that those sort of stories are wasting time in an office, like people are craving that sort of connection in the world there, that we need it to survive. And so the more leaders can take time to share those little stories and connect with people, the better they're going to be able to lead their teams, because they're going to have a deeper level of understanding and trust with them than if they're only focusing on the data.
We have, I'm not saying general a distrust towards our leadership and management, but it can exist in companies that there's a hierarchy and there's a pecking order, and there's a sense that, we are, maybe employed by somebody and they could decide to make decisions that we don't have any autonomy or any say in those decisions. And so when one of those leaders or executives or whoever, managers, opens up a little bit and experiences something or shows something that might resemble vulnerability, that might not seem like a leadership quality right off the bat. People might not think of as vulnerability as a strong skill in a leader, but I would argue that it's an essential skill as a leader, that I think showing us that you are, of course, capable in your capacity and doing the job that you have, and that you are aligned with me, that you are also human, that you are relatable, that you feel feelings and think thoughts, gives me hope and joy and connection, and builds the trust that I would have to work with and for that person.
Yeah, and it's such a weird like dichotomy where people, when they see other people being vulnerable and getting on stage or speaking or sharing those sort of stories in front of a team, they think, oh, wow, they're so strong for doing it. But then when you say, okay, your turn, like, oh, no, I don't want to seem weak to people. It's like, but you just saw someone else doing it and thought they were strong. Why would you think that other people, when they see you doing it, would think you're weak? And it's such this weird, like, defense mechanism that people have to try and avoid the discomfort. But I think
when they do, we see it. We see your discomfort. We know it. And guess what? It makes us more uncomfortable. Here is how to make it less uncomfortable for us. If you are uncomfortable, and listen, a lot of people terrified of public speaking. It's their least favorite thing. It's a quintessential fear that people have, more than death and all. Like, there's like a lot of, I think, fake stories about this, but or maybe exaggerated, but it is true that there's people who don't want to do that. They don't want to be seen in front of other people, honestly, and often because that fear of failure, that fear of messing up, that fear of looking bad, that fear of saying the wrong thing. So my approach and my advice to people like that is owning it, saying it, going up there and be like, I am so nervous right now. Just give me a second to catch my breath. When people, so, I host the Moth, which is a story slams show where people get up on stages in front of strangers. They tell true stories, some that they've never told publicly, some that they tell all the time. But regardless, it's a person getting on a stage, and the people that show up aren't pre-selected. They just put their names in a hat. And what I love is when those people mess up. When they get up on stage and they start to tell their story and everything's going fine, they say the first line or two, and then all of a sudden they just like kind of freeze like a deer in the headlights because they're trying to remember their story, their like memorized story, and they forget the words. And all of a sudden it's like they've like failed on their homework assignment. And almost without an exception, the audience starts to clap and cheers them on and says like, it's okay, you got this, good job, keep going, woohoo. They'll actually encourage them, and you watch the person physically relax. They're like relaxing, and then they just start to tell us the story, not memorize it, not say the words that they practice, but just tell us what happened. And the story gets better. It gets better when you are just you and you're telling the story. So if you're performing, you might think you're saying all the right words, but you're actually holding something back. And there's a part of us that sees that. So when you're a little bit more just yourself and flawed and personal and vulnerable, even if it's not perfect, we'll probably remember that stronger and clearer than we would with the perfect polished presentation.
Yeah, I like that distinction between, well, first of all, I would love the reaction of the crowd of everyone cheering when someone is struggling on the stage, because that's the exact sort of response that, like I said, diffuses the situation. And also that the misunderstanding of that thing that you have to be perfect all the time is something like a lot of also like leaders, when they're leading a team, think they all have to be, can't show any weaknesses or cracks or scuffs. Mm-hmm. These polished, perfect personas. And the problem with that is that if you don't have any like scuffs or grips or anything, or like cracks for people to grab onto, it's like trying to scale a sheer glass surface. Like yeah. Like, you know what to grip onto, you're going to bounce off like a bird hitting a windshield. And so you need the scuffs and the cracks and the gaps and the imperfections. People actually connect with you and get a foothold and grip on you and actually build a relationship off it, because no one's perfect like that. And even at the end of been a big trend lately is people getting that more authentic look at who people really are, but authenticity in a way that's genuine and real, and not kind of even like the overblown or kind of staged authenticity attempts to just backfire completely. But it's like you said, the not showing up and acting, but showing up and being human and admitting you're nervous and not saying everything super, not over rehearsing things and maybe mispronouncing a word or two.
It can feel really strange. Imagine just standing up in front of like your all hands meeting and saying, hey guys, I'm feeling a little underprepared for today's meeting. And I'm going to just acknowledge that and instead do something else. I'm going to turn this into a Q&A or a forum where we could talk about something that's going on. And I want to hear what you're doing. Like, it's okay to be okay. I think in certain situations, there's a danger, certainly. Like, could it go wrong? Yeah, maybe it could. And maybe that's a lesson. Maybe we learn from those things that go wrong, and maybe that becomes a story for later. But regardless, I don't know, something that I guess I would like to see more of and encourage more of is when we create some space for being yourself and being a little bit imperfect, what that also opens up is it opens up some dialogue and some conversation about how we can maybe do things differently or better, or examine or exhibit the true leadership that you are, which is somebody who is aligned and understanding and human. So like you were saying, like the chips in the glass that are going to help you scale it. So it's not just sliding down, but being connected to and a part of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Corey. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Corey, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.